Welcome to the newest episode of Close Encounters of the Dragonkind. You have a new host today for this episode. My name is Akir, a Dragonkin from the Netherlands. So instead of Lunat, you'll have to listen to me a bit more than usual. We have an episode lined up that will go about the forums and how the Dragonkind community has developed itself. But before we dive into that, I want to introduce the rest of the hosts. So go ahead.
Hello there. I'm Nimbus, a 19-year-old spiritual dragonkin from Texas. My pronouns are he, him, and its, and I've been awakened for 8 years. And I have other alter human identities as well, but the dragon is the main one because, I'm on this podcast for a reason. So,
All right then. Howdy, y'all. My name is Okura Wintermist. I am a psychologically identifying Arctic feathered dragon. I've been in the community for about 10 years, and well, that's all there is about to introduce for me. Oh, it's also worth pointing out that I have a bit of a special interest in forums as part of this community's history, as they did act as a bit of a pivotal point within our history. I shall pass on introductions to Bella.
Yes. So hi, my name is Bella or Kindidi. Can call me both ways. I'm 39 currently, and I'm a spiritual dragonkin from Germany, who's around in the community since 2007. It's quite a while now. Also back then during the forum days and experienced the transition from forums to Discord. So looking forward to today's episode.
All right, thank you all very much. I'll add a little bit more about myself. I noticed I didn't tell a whole lot. I awakened back in 2005. I'm a black dragon, dragoness even, so that's something to work with. Besides that, I had a outing in the community for about 8 years, so I missed a lot. So I'm hoping you all have a lot of things to tell about today's topic, because I don't really have a lot of experience with the forums. But yeah, like I said, we're gonna take a look at the community as a whole and how it developed itself through the rise of the internet. So late 90s, early zeros, maybe even a bit earlier. And especially what significance did forums have on communities like this? So the first question I want to throw in here is, how did online forums shape the development and growth of the otherkin community over the years?
I'd like to get the ball rolling on this one if that's okay. Well, due to the somewhat permanent nature of forums, they did provide an archive of, how would I say this? A lot of the discussions that happened within the earlier days of the community that were preserved in Usenet boards and forum posts could have served as reference points of knowledge for other newcomers that were trying to get their footing within this concept of draconity. If anyone else would like to follow up on that.
I just want to put it out there. Uh, I'm not very experienced with forums. I'm mostly just here to listen and put in my input as someone who's more up to date with the newer stuff, so to speak. So that's just, yeah. Sorry, I probably won't be speaking much.
No problem. I mean, I can add a little bit if it's okay, Akio.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So for me, I think forums were actually, I would say, the second big thing on internet communication platforms. I think news groups were even prior to that. And I think the biggest advantage that the forums had to the community itself and to form the community was that it offered a platform where very deep and elaborated discussions could be performed, and the answers of every member could be saved and basically preserved as in some sort of, yeah, let's say smaller library where you can sort topics by, yeah, under different and unique threads. And one could add an answer to a thread and perform a post on it, even though the original creation of the topic has been, I don't know, days, weeks, sometimes even years to that. And I think it was this possibility of discussing topics very deeply that forums offered that really brought the Dragonkin community rolling, at least from my point of view, from 2007 on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add to that. I really think this helped the community, grow into itself more or less. I mean, if we look at where we are now, we couldn't have been here, sitting here, talking with each other without the development of the forums and how this helped grow the community as a whole.
With that being said, IRC channels, whilst they did definitely serve their place as a faster method of communication, forums being such a viable reference point definitely did bolster the status of the community.
Yeah, Kura, to zoom in on that, what role did you think forums play in the otherkin or dragonkind community? So, support, advice, finding a shoulder to lean on or a wing to hide under.
In this current day and age, this is actually a bit of a tricky question, because in this current day and age, regressively, forums don't quite have the weight they did, but
But did they before?
In
Like late
of
90s,
course.
early zeros?
Of course. If we're talking from the historical concept of when forums were most prominent, they effectively served all of those purposes. It was where effectively figures in the community could meet each other, learn to understand different points of view, make friends, find support, effectively everything in between. Even if the subsequent methods of communication went beyond forums themselves, most people did make acquaintance through forums. They were able to communicate very specific ideas through forums and effectively form their own subgroups through forums.
And let me maybe add a little bit to this. If you think of the technical part of it, when you look back in the early 2000s and late 90s, how the internet was, how it was basically set up and everyone's internet connection was set up. You usually didn't have things like a flat rate, at least not here in Germany. That was just a thing that began emerging, I would say, around 2003, 2005, approximately. So it will probably be 1 or 2 years earlier happening in the United States. But that was probably one of the benefits of a forum, actually, because members didn't have to be online all the time to write and comment on stuff. But as I said on the earlier question, you could throw in a post and some other who's coming online maybe an hour or 2 or 3 later, or maybe a day later, could read it all back. And so both parties don't have to be online or didn't have to be online at the same time.
Do you feel like otherkin back then had more patience?
I think the patience was coming from the structure and the framework that forums were giving them. Because in the end, if you wanted to write an elaborated post on a forum, you usually took yourself a little bit time. If it was a emotionally heated debate, you usually didn't just post one sentence and hit the enter button like you do on Discord nowadays or on X or on Tumblr, where you are kind of at least on some of the platforms kind of restricted to a certain amount of characters you can write. But usually you were writing your text, and during the writing you probably wound yourself a little bit down, so that you still could transport what you wanted to say and not post something in a very emotionally heated way.
Alkura, have you come across certain threads that were very heated up and fast pacing?
All the time. But just like how Bella said, even the fastest paced arguments that I would see in forums, mind you, I really started to get involved in community in 2014, but even then, the fastest paced arguments, threads, whatever, they would usually have an update rate of like half an hour per post. It was quite unusual to have shorthand posts in very, very rapid fire. Although in saying that, it is something I noticed the more the community made that leap from forums to social media and then effectively started to use that behavior that you find in instant messaging in the form factor, which wasn't all too compatible naturally. Even the fastest paced arguments, the most heated debates, as a general rule, were still relatively well worded, and like I said, there was usually a rough rate of a rough rate of one post every 30-ish minutes, and usually if somebody said something thought-provoking, there would actually be a bit of time before any real replies were made to it, which again shows that effectively, like Bella said, by design, forums do give you the opportunity to draft, review, and think about something before you post it. I'm not too sure where I'm going with this here, but I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, you're making sense to me. I hope the rest also understands.
Mhm.
Nimbus, I have a question for you. Because what I'm wondering is if you're listening to this, do you think that a forum would be more or better to use for you than Discord?
Good question. For me personally, I prefer Discord just because it's the format I'm used to. If there was like a fairly active forum going on, I would definitely be willing to try it, but I can't guarantee that I would be like used to it. I can't guarantee like how quickly I'd get used to it, you know?
Yeah, so the pace of a website or a program like Discord basically makes the choice for you if you would like to use it or not. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. For me, I prefer, I just, because I feel like with Discord, it can be easier to just put out I feel like with forums, there's a little more, for me at least, it almost feels like there's a little bit of formality to it. And maybe there isn't because I haven't been on them since I was a kid, but but like with mostly adult populated forums, it feels a little more like formal than Discord. You know, for Discord feels a little more casual and a little more like welcoming, so to speak. But that's not to say that forums are bad or unwelcoming. I'm just not used to them.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds valid enough.
Yeah.
To continue on that, I have a question for everybody. So we talked about the ways that forums have provided opportunities for the otherkin community to connect and find support basically among each other before programs like Discord or MSN Messenger or Skype existed. The other side of that is, have we observed any unique communication patterns or cultural norms within these forums? Like you mentioned, Nimbus, the formality of certain posts stood out to you, but I'm wondering if anybody else noticed something.
Well, naturally, because forum posts have that degree of formality to them, as a forum user, I have noticed that it is expected that you be a bit more open about the way you identify, and generally about yourself. A pattern I noticed, I don't know how valid it would be in this current day and age, is forums, i.e., draconity.org. But getting back to what I was saying, apologies. It was expected that you'd be able to describe who you are. Effectively, forums, I believe the biggest reason that a lot of people also dislike forums is because there was a bit of a grilling process in a lot of communities, if grilling is really the correct term. In other words, because by design you have the time to answer questions in detail, you were expected to answer questions in detail, be it when you awoke, the circumstances around your awakening, where you are currently, etc., etc. Users who are not willing to divulge this information were met with a little bit of scrutiny, because it's generally, expected that anyone who's in this space has had these experiences in their own manner. Some may consider this exclusionary, but I personally always saw it as a matter of quality control.
Would you also say it was a way of gatekeeping almost?
Gatekeeping is a very extreme term. If
True.
gatekeeping is what I would define as, you need to identify an X way, and you need to do Y things in order to be a part of us. Now, some
Well,
communities had now. Apologies. Go on,
no,
please.
what I want to say is, let's put it another way. Do you think
Mhm.
that the way that the forums expected people to, or non-people in this case,
Exactly.
expected others to answer stuff in detail, that it would scare some others off?
Well, to clarify, the detail didn't need to be didn't need to be at the level of a novel. It didn't need to be insanely intricate. It just had to present that. I guess it just had to present that you had an understanding of lived experiences, that you've actually how do I say this? Effectively, it just needs to show that as a member. Sorry, my words evade me today. Hmm.
I, I
This
think
is a
what
bit of a
you,
hard one to
yeah, I
word.
think what you try to say is that it's not so much that they're trying to scare others away, but more that there's a certain level of sophistication required or asked from others when we're using a forum.
I wouldn't necessarily even say a level of sophistication necessary. There is no, bar of entry for what somebody could, for, somebody to feel they have permission to post. What I meant more was, as people who identify the way we do, we all have a set of circumstances. How we came to the awareness, or if we're still coming to the awareness of, whatever we may be. This of course goes beyond draconity. Um, how we have come to that, maybe some of the steps we've taken to try to find out more about ourselves, or maybe some of the steps we took. Nothing too necessarily personal, but enough to show that, you have had those experiences that are pretty, I would argue, are fairly baseline for most of us here. So that wouldn't be gatekeeping as much as it's to, ensure that the people who are presenting themselves to these communities are a bit more earnest about, whatever they claim to be.
Could I perhaps add something in?
For sure.
To me, it also sounds like the process might be something like it could help determine whether someone is, say, a troll or not, because I know that in the community there's a big issue of people joining solely to like make fun of otherkind and mock
Oh,
us. So,
oh yes. Thankfully, actually, a little bit of an observation I'd like to make on that, or a little bit of a comment I'd like to make on that, is it was comparatively a lot more difficult for trolls to infiltrate forum spaces. I feel like the advent of a lot of trolling behavior that we see comes thanks to instant messaging. When you have to be more deliberate about what you say and how you present yourself, it does make it was effectively a project to troll a forum. Whereas these days, especially with Discord servers, it's something that somebody could do on a whim within, say, couple of minutes.
Mm.
I've always found that a bit funny personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I remember again when I was back when I used forums as a kid. I just remember that were very frequent problems with trolls, mainly just because it was a forum made for kids and kids are gonna like be dumb and like cause problems on purpose. But I just remember there was like, and you were expected to make an intro, of course, and like oftentimes people could tell whether or not you were a troll solely by what you said in your intro and how you said it and whatnot. So yeah, I can understand why it would be more difficult to be trolling on forums and stuff.
Yeah. Bela, have you,
Yeah.
when in your use of forums, have you seen any unique communications that you didn't see in any other forums between otherkin or dragonkin?
I don't know exactly what you mean. Can
Like,
you?
stood something out for you when using forums between otherkin or dragonkin that you normally wouldn't see on a forum? Was there a certain way of communication we dragonkin had?
Yeah, so what I've noticed back, not only back in the days, but over the years when I was using a forum, and to comment on that a little bit, it was mainly a German forum, a local German forum on Draconity that I was being a part of back then, was that the topics usually were more elaborated and went way deeper than it is possible in nowadays Discords or even back then in IRC servers. Um, but that's mainly like we pointed already out due to the framework of it. When you communicate on a forum, you usually build your threads and your post like you would write a story or like you would write an essay, for example, on a given topic. Um, on the other side, if you write on Discord or back in the days, if you write on IRC, it's more like, yeah, an everyday chit chat. So you meet someone on the street, say hi, how are you? And you get to like some sort of small talk. And that's basically how I see on a metaphorical level the way of communicating on forums and on nowadays Discord. And to come back to your question, that was a little sidetrack there. So from my perception, the topics went way deeper. You could actually stay on a topic for several days or weeks that you cannot do on nowadays Discords unless you're using threads, which we for several reasons also don't do here on the Spire. And um, that's that's also why topics, even though they have the potential to go really deep into a specific topic or a specific theme, usually won't won't reach that deepness because it ends due to the structure on how it is communicated here and how the framework is living up to it in Discord after like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 hours max.
Yeah, when I awakened, I did use the otherkin.net forum a lot, although I wasn't posting myself a whole lot. I was mainly a lurker. And I'm not sure if maybe it's because I only just awakened, but somehow the way of communication on that forum felt very much welcoming, actually. I didn't really mind the way it was written or how everybody really elaborated on everything. It just felt nice to read so much detail about everybody's lives or past lives or concurrent lives. So for me personally, a forum has a nostalgic feeling of being welcomed into the community almost.
Yeah, I can second that.
And yeah, to continue on that, what's the significance of forums as platforms for identity exploration within the otherkin community?
Beyond what we've already touched on, I may leave this one for somebody to get the ball rolling on.
Yeah, I mean, to pick up the topic of going deep on elaborated topics in forums, I think that is, in my opinion, one of the main points. I mean, identity is such a huge and such a broad term that has so many facets to it, so many levels where you can see identity under. You can see identity from a spiritual point of view. You could see identity as a sort of social identity, what your role in society is, for example. You can see identity on a personal level. Then you have the terms that are used in the English language. I'm not sure if it means the same thing, but when you identify as something, is this your whole identity? And I would say it is only a part of the identity, because that's like the level of not only broadness but also the level of depth that this term has to offer. And I'm losing my line. Can you repeat the question again?
Certainly. Besides, I don't want to spoil the next topic of the episode. So. That's a spoiler in itself. The question was mainly the significance for identity exploration within the otherkin community. I mean, this being otherkin is such a huge part of the identity of everybody, while also being a highly personal thing. So how did forums supply in exploration of yourself?
Okay, to just make it to pick up the pieces that I've mentioned, that I've just mentioned, is that I think that the discussions on forums were more connected. Like I said, identity offers like these different parts of identity: social identity, spiritual identity, individual identity to identify as. And it felt like on a forum, due to the framework and the structures forums are made, these topics were more connected and were more put into the framework of a thread. And the discussion also happens on Discord, but at least when I read about it, it feels a little bit more disconnected. So it feels like the constructs, which are all running under the umbrella term of identity, are more separated, if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
It's just a subjective feeling to it.
Yeah, so this for everybody else as well. Do you feel like because forums gave more detail, while Discord doesn't really have the ability to give more detail, or because it goes faster, but you also, you do see people develop themselves because they only awakened just now, and they develop themselves just fine in Discord as well. So where is the difference between otherkin exploring themselves on forums and otherkin exploring themselves on Discord?
When you're able to rapidly fire off whatever is going on in your mind without really giving yourself time to think, you may get to an answer faster, but you may later on find out that answer wasn't exactly correct. I believe that's one of the major drawbacks to faster methods of communication when it comes to something such as self-exploration. It does give more of an opportunity to, I dare say, almost let others come to conclusions on your behalf. So as to how it acts, I mean, I guess one observation I have forums compared to now is you didn't have people changing their identification or suddenly or one day realizing they were not exactly on the right train of mind all along. Back in forums, I should say, if I haven't already. Apologies. Whereas nowadays, that does seem to be increasingly common. When you've got, like 30 odd people welcoming you into a community within like the span of 5 odd minutes and giving all sorts of little pointers and, whatever, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce.
Yeah, makes sense. Nimbus, how did you experience that?
I have been using Discord for a while, so I'm kind of used to like things. I'm kind of used to like there being like a lot when you first join stuff, but also there are some servers where I'm just like don't speak anymore because there's like just so much going on, and so like I totally get it where it can just like be so overwhelming, and also with the whole thing about people like giving you answers for you. I've seen a lot of that happen in younger alter humans nowadays. Like I've had a lot of young alter humans come up to me and be like, "Can you tell me whether I'm Etherean or not?" And it's just like, well, I can't tell you that for you. I can maybe help you, but I can't give you a straight answer.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel about when you awakened, you used forums to find information, right?
Okay, so for a little bit of context, I have a dissociative disorder that kind of screws with my memory, so I can't really remember it that well, but I'm pretty sure I used community a little bit. I don't know, but
And do you feel like because forums often hold so much information and so much resources for the otherkin community as a whole, do you feel that it's a significant part of the growth and the community in itself?
Oh, absolutely. It's like losing them would be like the burning of the Library of Alexandria.
Yeah, makes sense. And I completely agree,
Yeah.
by the way. I'm just throwing out
Mhm.
questions.
Yeah.
Bela, how do you feel about the amount of information that's being held on forums for the otherkin community? Do you fear for them, or do you think they'll always be there?
I mean, they will probably be there as long as you have access to the forums. I mean, some forums are probably, yeah, I think devastated is the wrong term to it, but like basically a virtual lost place, if you can say so. Yeah, the information that was posted there still is there, but if you want to set up a new user account, usually, at least that's the way how I knew it, you have to get unlocked by an admin or a moderator on the forum, so you could not just register yourself and start posting. And when the moderators and the administrators are not there anymore, there's no way of creating new accounts. So the knowledge is probably still there for the old users, but new ones, at least if the forum isn't still active anymore, won't have the possibility to it.
Yeah, and you also, of course, see a lot of otherkins creating wiki pages like Wikipedia, and then just for the otherkin community and such, and the Therian community. But you also often see that they're not complete. Do you feel like at some point there will be a massive undertaking to take all the information from the forums and rewrite them all into a wiki page?
I mean, that will probably be one way to take it. I see, I mean, what I see nowadays with Discord and Tumblr and X and all the small or not so small social media platforms is that the knowledge that was once concentrated in one forum is now spread among different Tumblr pages, Instagram accounts, Discord servers, and so on and so forth. So I think one of the big tasks for the upcoming otherkind community will be, at some point at least, when the community is growing and growing, to grasp that information and somehow link it together into one space. So you don't have all the spread apart, but also have at least a way of getting to the information that it's not spread too wide. Because this, I think, in the end, um, it will be a point, or there will be a point where it's really hard to find the information out there because it is so vast and so spread it. Because just as an analogy, what would you do if you don't have like a search machine like Google or anything? How would you find web pages? It
Do
would be
we,
very tough.
do we need a otherkin Google?
Other Google.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alkura.
Yeah, Alkura, do you want to add something to this?
Oh, not too much necessarily, but I did just want to say that trend of decentralization it's already happening. We are already starting to witness the consequences of effectively, how do I say it? I have found that a fair bit of newly arising knowledge within the community, or at least the way that old ideas are still shared, is no longer accessible through conventional methods. I.e. the general web. It'll usually be found in platforms such as Discord, which you can't exactly reach with a search engine.
Yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree, and it's already a problem and will only grow bigger.
Precisely.
Yeah, Alkura, I was wondering, do you still find yourself returning to forums for information nowadays?
Oh, I try my best to, but regrettably, so a lot of the forums I personally relied on back in the day aren't necessarily active anymore, or in one particular case, didn't exactly have the best moderation group behind them, so I actively choose to avoid them. In saying that, there are a few forum posts that I have, well, back in the day at least, that I did save. Not to sound arrogant, but I don't personally. Another reason I don't rely on them much anymore is because I do feel at this point a bit more qualified to answer certain questions off the top of my mind.
Yeah,
But if I
wisdom comes with the years.
I suppose. But if there's something I absolutely do need to recall, I will use I will search a couple of forums as a point of reference. That being said, I mean, the ones that I used to predominantly participate in are thankfully still alive. I won't necessarily say active, but they're still being hosted and they're still they're still accessible on the proviso that account verification was not a manual process. If the admins have decided to peace out but have left the forum up for some reason, you might not be able to just make a new account and log in.
Do you think there's a danger in public forums within the otherkin community?
Public, as in there's okay, so there.
So
okay,
you don't need
can-
an account to access the information on the forum, which
Oh,
is good, of
just-
course, if it's abandoned. But there's information in there that's
Just like
a
all forums. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
You
No,
were
I was
saying?
just saying there's a lot of information in there that's really personal. So
Two things. First off, whatever you put online, you are making a choice to put online.
yep.
Regrettably, if you are unable to edit out or delete a post, it's there. It's there forever. Secondly, the reason a lot of this information in forums, or the reason a lot of forums, at least the majority of their content is not publicly available, is because if it was without any verification process, they would be overrun with. I'm not even going to say trolls because I don't think that's as much of an issue on forums these days since they prefer faster methods of communications. But ad bots for sure. Um, the whatever content is left on the forums would no longer be accessible if every second post was just some random person trying to sell shoes in the Philippines or wherever have you. I say Philippines specifically because in a it's not a forum related to draconity, but in a more technical forum I'm in, some individual somewhere in the world decided that that forum was dead, even though it very much wasn't, and started to spam a lot of .ph links to some kind of leather worker or shoemaker. But that's not a related story at all. So apologies for trailing off into there.
Sounds like a good story though.
Yeah, maybe they meant the Shoemaker Livy 9 satellite back on was it Jupiter? But okay, no.
That'd be nice, but sadly no.
Bela, do you often find yourself returning to forums for information, or do you also rely on your own wisdom nowadays?
Don't say that big word wisdom there. Of course, I'm still here and there. I'm still active on the forums, especially on the German one, because I'm still a moderator there. It's been pretty. Yeah, it's not really dead, but it's probably like Alkura has said it. It's basically alive, but the frequency of posts is like on a daily or bi-daily schedule. Um, so yeah, I'm still active
Daily
on the
or
forum.
oh,
Oh,
sorry.
every second day. I don't know if that's bi-daily, so every second
I
day.
that is still more frequent than the vast majority of English speaking forums. And I would just like to comment from my observations about forum activity in general, the non-English speaking forum communities have generally survived trends a lot more than the English speaking ones.
Yeah, probably. And I mean, I cannot say for certain because I haven't been around to English forums a lot. But at least how I perceive it nowadays, if when I searched for English forums of on otherkinds, and the way I see our local German one, I probably can second that to a certain degree. Yeah.
Well, believe me when I say this, I am currently reviewing what was one of the far more popular English speaking forums back in the day, and rest assured the posts here are on the real posts I should say here are on a fortnightly basis. So if you're, telling me that like every other day there were like posts happening, that's still a hell of a lot more frequent than what I've witnessed lately.
It was just an approximation. Could be 3 days, but it was around that
It's
time, I would say.
fair enough.
On the
Still more
topic of
frequent though.
still active forums, I'm
Mm,
gonna lean heavily on Alkura and Bela for this. But do
by
you
all
have
means.
examples of projects, events, or initiatives within the otherkin community that were organized through forums or are still being organized?
When you say projects or initiatives, okay, I'm going to just I'm
It,
gonna
it,
err on
it
the
could
side of
it could even be meetups that were scheduled through the forum back then.
ah, not at all to my knowledge. Nothing that is officially hosted. No events that are officially run through a forum. Just trying to think. I think draconity.org might have organized a couple of meetups when they were going through their revival. I can't even remember if it was 2022 or 2021, or perhaps a bit later than that. Something like somewhere within the last few years. Draconity.org, I could be wrong on this, did organize a couple of meets. I don't know to what level of success or if those, proceeded. It just seems that a lot of forum-based communities just don't have that same energy to them anymore to really be able to spur events, or I guess howls is a more appropriate term, leaning on what they used to be called.
Yeah, in Germany, I could tell a little bit about that. So, in our local German community, we had regular meetups each year, like on a annual basis. They usually took place somewhere around July and August every year, and we actually rented a youth hostel that was put on an old castle in the German Eifel for it, and it ran from, I would say, I think the first meetup that I took place was 2000 and or participated was 2009, and it ran, I think, until 2016 was the last one, and it was actually a really, I have to say, for an otherkin event. It was a really well organized convention where we met up for several days. I think it was at least 4 days. I guess it was Wednesday to Sunday. And yeah, we have several events planned, like a barbecue held together. We went to an amusement park together. And as we had basically had the whole youth hostel for our usage, um, we could, yeah, we could actually talk a lot. And um, to be fair, it created a whole nother level of depth to the topic of otherkin, because on online you usually just see the avatar, and when you meet another kin live, it has a whole different set of feelings usually to it. You get to know more about their lives that you usually won't necessarily tell on the internet, because you are in a more private space. You actually see the other in front of you. So um, it 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 was always a great experience. Of course, like the first time or the first days, everyone, me included, was very, oh wow, I'm really here. What am I doing now? But it gets better. It was, I would say, like looking back to those events, I really missed them. I would wish that such events could take place today also. Yeah.
Yeah, who knows in the future?
Well, I mean, there's always the NDG for anybody who might want to, fork out the cash for it.
NDG?
Norwegian Dragon King Gathering.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I heard of that, yeah.
Yeah.
That does sound
Um,
really cool to attend someday.
I would like to, but being all the way down in Australia, I don't see it happening at any time soon, unfortunately. But yeah, I agree on it would be great if those types of meetings could still happen, but for a combination of reasons, including the general younger age of the community, I don't really see it being possible as such anymore. Um, I I believe this is more of a consequence of forums originating during a time where most kids weren't really using the internet. Of course, during the 90s and even to an extent the early 2000s, the internet was more of a it was more something that you would use that you would start using in your teens or your early adulthood. And as a result, the community was a little bit older and were actually able to go out to those types of meetings. They were able to communicate in those ways. As the age of the community shifts younger and younger, I mean, we've technically hit the floor where, like a lot of 13 or 12-year-olds are now joining the community. I would say, how exactly are you going to coordinate a meetup with a bunch of kids? You're not. You're just not. And with people within our age ranges being further and further in between than fewer, it's hard to coordinate these types of efforts. I do understand there's reasonable success in Europe with these these smaller types of meetings. They're still definitely possible, but in most of the world, we're just a bit too isolated these days, especially here in Australia. I think the last time we had any kind of meetup of this kind was during the late 90s. In fact, at least that is the only evidence-based recorded instance of such a meetup happening that I can really recall off the top of my head.
For me personally, I've been digging some around while this was going on. I sadly couldn't find the forum that we used to have back then. There was a Dutch-Belgium forum we used for the local community, and I co-organized meetings back then. That was like 2007 to 2013, maybe, something like that. And we used to have a meeting every year or so, or maybe multiple times a year. But I can't find the forum anymore. I don't think it exists anymore, which is sad because even there was a lot of information on it about the very localized Dutch and Belgium otherkind group. But that's also lost to the internet, I guess.
For sure. It's a common fate for a lot of forums, sadly. I mean,
Yeah.
I can especially imagine, because I could be completely wrong here, but I believe I'd be safe in saying that the English-speaking ones, the reason that a lot of them are still, actually, I wouldn't really say the reason, but no, that statement is entirely baseless, and I will choose to withdraw it before I say it. Never mind.
I'll continue with another question for you all. So
Go for it.
in what ways do forums differ from other online platforms, and then mostly on their impact on the community, but also in general? I mean, we touched on this before, but maybe it's nice to get a conclusion on it.
I think a better question to ask would be, in what ways do they not? It is effectively an entirely different method of forums compared to virtually everything else. I mean, compared to Facebook, Discord, TikTok, Instagram, even YouTube Shorts, hell, for the current generation of kids, which I fail to understand. Forums are vastly different. But once again, it always comes down to, how do I say it? I believe, and I'm sorry that we've touched on this so many times, but I believe it just comes down simply to the pacing of everything. I will let someone else speak for the time being, though. I just need to gather some thoughts on this.
I think a lot of the things already have been said in a sometimes in a main or in a side sentence during the other topics. I agree on Alcura's pacing theory. It's not a theory, but pacing arguments. I think it's. I don't know if it's a thing that forums necessarily gave with their way of being, but it felt more isolated in them because you have a confined space. Usually a server or the way I would say not only the Discord server, but the way the otherkin information and the otherkin ways of communication are so vast nowadays. You have like Discord, social media, different Tumblrs, and etc. etc. You don't have that isolated space anymore, and this could be a benefit, but it also can be a negative aspect to it because usually in an isolated space that forums gave back in the days, um, like it was already mentioned, it usually was a little bit easier to open up, even on a deeper level, not only because of the pacing, but like I said, also the way you felt a little bit more secure, I would say. And that also is regarding to personal information like where you live and etc. Um, this is way more open nowadays. It offers, of course, a more easy access to the community, um, and you can learn, I would say, more fast if you're really willing to learn, and you can basically quick connect or connect quicker with everyone. But it's not so secluded is the wrong word, but isolated, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to actually comment as well. As far as like a sense of belonging and I mean, as far as a sense of belonging, when it came to forums, there was a much more incentive to stay in one space. Whereas these days, it feels a lot more transient. Like, it's far harder to establish yourself within a community and say, Discord when your name is effectively seen and forgotten almost immediately. With forums, there was definitely, even in the larger forums, there was always this deeper sense of intimacy. You definitely felt like you knew others better, relatively speaking. And that kind of connection with a community would definitely it would definitely encourage people to want to stay in one space, especially because having to introduce yourself all over again to another board was generally a bit of a pain in the ass, for a lack of better words.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. To hook onto that, is that something we can learn from forums and use for the future of our community?
It's something we can definitely learn from and should learn from. Is it something we can use? I don't know if that's possible anymore.
Are there other things you would think we can use for the future that are basically being used in the past on forums?
Well, if I have to think of one thing, it's think before you type.
And think before you
which
speak.
absolutely. I guess it's a bit more general advice, but I feel like a lot of the problems that have occurred within this community could have been resolved if the people who were, speaking up, be it in a misguided or brash fashion, had just 5 or 10 minutes to consider what they were about to say or do. This community and many others were a lot better off when people had to take the time before making any actions.
Perfect answer. Does anybody else want to add something to that?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have you pretty much just like said everything there was to say, and I don't have much experience in the topic, so
All
Yeah,
right.
I think maybe what future otherkin that join the community can learn from it, and also what we yeah, let's call it elder scales in quote unquote. I don't feel old. Um, can add to them and give them as a partake maybe is it usually just I mean it's more of a general thing, yes, but it everything just takes its time. I think the pacing you have nowadays on the internet, and especially when it comes to something so delicate like personality or identity, um, it needs time to mature. It needs time to settle. And that was a good thing that forums also gave due to their slower pacing nature, is that usually you had that time. And even after a year or 2 years, you could revisit a post back then and watch the discussion either you made or you participated in from a whole different point of view. And by that, I mean the point of view from you, but 2 years more matured. And this can to see this difference, what and who you were 2 years ago and what and who you are now, can give so much of an impulse on further maturing and learning. And that is something that nowadays on Discourse probably and even social media probably won't happen anymore. But I think that is a thing that we who lived through that, matured through that, and built our identity on is something we should, in one way or another, pass on
I
to the newly awakened otherkin.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, you worded that very well.
And I think that's a really good point to wrap this up. Unless anybody else has something to add.
I do wish we could roll back some of the decisions that were made in the wider community by a good 15 years. I feel like we'd all vastly benefit from that.
Well, if you figure out how a time machine works, let me know.
Work in progress, buddy.
All right. If nobody else has anything to add, then I'll want to thank everybody for listening, and the hosts, of course, for participating and for telling their stories and their views on everything. And thank you for this episode of Close Encounters of the Dragonkind, and I'll see you all next time, hopefully.
Thanks.
Indeed.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Fairly well.